The stars had always been quiet in the outer rim. Commander Tejo stood on the bridge of the UNSF Horizon's edge and watched the endless black space stretch before him. His ship was not a warship. It was a diplomatic vessel, built for peace and friendship. The hull was painted white with blue stripes, the colors of the United Nations Space Force's diplomatic corps. No heavy cannons, no missile bays, just communication arrays and shields strong enough to survive asteroid dust. Behind the horizon's edge flew 4 other ships. Together, they formed a small convoy carrying scientists, diplomats, and gifts for the Velen Collective. This was humanity's first cultural exchange mission with the Velen, a peaceful federation of 3 alien species who had never known war. The Velen had no military. They believed that kindness and treaties could solve all problems. Humanity had smiled and agreed to send unarmed ships as a sign of trust. Tejo was not sure if this was wise, but orders were orders. In the science bay below the bridge, Dr. Yuna checked her equipment for the 100th time. She was a xenobiologist, a scientist who studied alien life. Her job was to learn about Velen biology and culture. She had spent 3 years preparing for this mission. Her notes filled 17 digital tablets. Her excitement filled every part of her heart. "We are 3 days from Velen space," her assistant said. Yuna smiled. 3 days until we make history." But history had other plans. On the 3rd night of the journey, a sound cut through the silence of the bridge. It was a signal, weak and broken, coming from somewhere ahead. The communications officer, a young woman named Subin, pressed her hand to her earpiece and listened. Her face went pale. "Commander," she said, her voice shaking, "I am receiving a distress signal. It is coming from HFY 4. Tejo frowned. HFY 4 was a Velen colony world. 200,000 civilians lived there in simple farming communities. They grew food for the rest of the collective. They had no weapons, no soldiers, no reason to send a distress signal. "Play it," Tejo ordered. The speakers crackled. Then came the screaming. It was not a recorded message. It was not an automated warning. It was a voice, raw and broken, crying out in a language the ship's computer translated in real time. "Please, anyone. They are killing us. The ships came from nowhere. Please help us. My children." "Please." The voice cut off. Static filled the bridge. Subin looked at Tejo with tears in her eyes. "Commander, that signal is live. Someone is dying right now." Tejo's hands tightened into fists. His orders were clear. "Proceed to Velen space. Do not engage in any conflict. Report any unusual activity to Earth Command." But someone was screaming. "Change course," Tejo said quietly. "Take us to HFY 4. The convoy turned and flew toward the dying voice. What they found broke something inside every human who saw it. HFY 4 hung in space like a wounded animal. Smoke rose from its surface in thick black columns. Cities that had once glowed with soft lights now burned with orange fire. And circling the planet like sharks around bleeding prey were 40 warships bearing a symbol Tejo had seen only in intelligence reports. The Koreth Dominion. The Koreth were an empire built on conquest. They took what they wanted and destroyed what they did not need. For centuries, they had avoided human space because humans were too far away to be worth the trouble. But the Velen were close. The Velen were weak. The Velen had no one to protect them. Until now. "Commander," the sensor officer reported, his voice hollow. "I am detecting Koreth ground forces on the surface. They are moving through the cities. They are rounding up civilians." Yuna had come to the bridge. She stood behind Tejo and stared at the burning world on the view screen. "Rounding them up for what?" No one answered. No one needed to. Subin intercepted another transmission. This one was clearer. A Velen mother hiding in a basement, whispering into a communication device, begging anyone listening to save her children before the soldiers found them. Please, the mother said. I can hear them coming. Please, my babies, someone please help my babies. The transmission ended with the sound of a door breaking open. Yuna turned away. Her shoulders shook. Tae-ho looked at his crew. He saw fear in their eyes. He also saw something else. Something harder. We are 5 ships, his first officer said quietly. They have 40. If we fight, we die. I know, Tae-ho replied. Our orders say to observe and report. I know. Commander? The first officer's voice cracked. What do we do? Tae-ho closed his eyes. He thought about his family on Earth. He thought about the regulations he had followed his entire career. He thought about the politicians who would judge his decision from the safety of their offices. Then he thought about the mother in the basement. He thought about her children. He opened his eyes. We cannot save everyone, he said, but we can save some. If we attack the fleet, we draw their attention. Their ground forces will slow down. Escape shuttles can launch. Every minute we give them is another life saved. The bridge was silent. This is not an order, Tae-ho continued. I will not force anyone to die with me. If any of you want to leave, take the escape pods now. I will not blame you. No one moved. Subin wiped her eyes and sat up straight. I will stay, Commander. The first officer nodded slowly. We all will. Tae-ho felt something warm spread through his chest. Pride, sorrow, love for the men and women who stood with him. Then let us show them what humans do when someone asks for help. He opened a channel to the other 4 ships. Their captains appeared on screen, their faces grim but determined. You all heard the signal, Tae-ho said. You all see what is happening. I am going to attack. I am going to buy time for the people on that planet. If any of you want to run, run now. No shame, no judgment. One by one, the captains responded. We are with you. To the end. For the Valen. For humanity. Tae-ho smiled. It was a sad smile, but it was real. All ships, he commanded. Form attack formation. Target their lead vessels. Make them chase us. Make them hurt. The 5 white ships turned toward the fleet of 40, and the battle began. The first Koreth missile exploded against the shields of the horizon's edge, and the entire ship shook like a toy in the hands of an angry child. Tae-ho gripped his command chair and watched the view screen fill with fire. Shields at 70%, the tactical officer shouted. Keep moving, Tae-ho ordered. Do not let them lock on. The 5 human ships flew into the Koreth fleet like birds attacking wolves. They were small, they were weak, they were completely outmatched, but they were fast, and they were brave, and they fought with a fury that confused the enemy. The Koreth admiral stared at his tactical display and could not understand what he was seeing. 5 tiny ships, clearly not warships, were attacking his fleet of 40 destroyers and cruisers. It made no sense. It was suicide. Destroy them, the admiral ordered with a wave of his hand. Then continue the harvest. But destroying them was not easy. The human ships did not fight like soldiers. They fought like ghosts. They would appear behind a Koreth destroyer, fire everything they had, and then vanish into the chaos before the enemy could respond. They used asteroids as cover. They flew through debris fields that larger ships could not follow. They did everything wrong by military standards, and somehow it worked. On the surface of Hyras 4, the Koreth ground forces received new orders. The fleet was under attack. All available units were to hold position and wait. In the burning cities, the killing stopped. Not because the Koreth had mercy, but because they were confused. Who was attacking their fleet? How many ships were there? Was this a trap? And in that moment of confusion, escape shuttles began to launch. Yuna had left the bridge. She was now in the cargo bay, helping load Velen refugees onto one of the Horizon's Edge's small transport shuttles. The survivors had been picked up from a rooftop, their bodies covered in ash and their eyes empty with shock. Move quickly, Yuna said gently. We need to get you away from here. A Velen child grabbed her hand. The child was small, with large dark eyes and thin fingers that trembled with fear. "Where are we going?" the child asked. Yuna knelt down and tried to smile. "Somewhere safe, I promise." She did not know if she could keep that promise, but she made it anyway. On the bridge, Taeho watched another human ship die. The Swift Current, the smallest vessel in their convoy, had taken too many hits. Its shields had failed. Its hull was breaking apart. On the view screen, Taeho saw the ship's captain, a young man named Dong Ha, appear for one final transmission. "Commander," Dong Ha said. His face was bloody. Smoke filled the bridge behind him. "It has been an honor." "The honor is mine," Taeho replied. The Swift Current exploded. 63 humans died in an instant. Taeho did not have time to mourn. The battle continued. For 6 hours, the human ships danced with death. They twisted and turned through the Koreth fleet. They took hits that should have destroyed them and somehow kept flying. They fired their small weapons at engines and sensors, not trying to kill enemy ships, but to blind and cripple them. And every minute they survived, more shuttles escaped from the planet below. Subin tracked the escaping vessels on her console. "Commander, we have confirmed 300 shuttles away from the surface. That is approximately 15,000 civilians. 15,000 lives." Taeho held on to that number. It made the dying worth something. But the end was coming. One by one, the human ships fell. The Starlight Promise was cut in half by a Koreth battlecruiser. The Morning Grace flew directly into an enemy destroyer, sacrificing itself to destroy a ship 10 times its size. The Gentle Dawn was surrounded and torn apart by concentrated fire. Now only the horizon's edge remained. The ship was broken. Fires burned in 3 decks. Half the crew was dead or wounded. The shields were gone. The engines were failing. Taeho sat in his command chair, blood running down his face from a cut on his forehead, and watched the Koreth fleet close in around him. "Commander," Subin said. She was still at her station, still doing her job, even though tears streamed down her cheeks. "All shuttles have reached minimum safe distance. They are jumping to hyperspace now." Taeho closed his eyes. "How many?" "Final count. 22,000 civilians. Plus our own evacuation pods. 22,000 lives, saved because 5 small ships refused to run away." "Subin," Taeho said, opening his eyes. "Is the main transmitter still working?" She checked her console. "Yes, Commander, barely." "Good, I need you to send everything. All our sensor data, all our recordings, everything we saw here today. Send it to Earth Command. Send it to every human colony. Send it to everyone." Subin nodded. Her fingers flew across the console. "Transmission ready." "Include a personal message from me," Taeho continued. He stood up slowly, painfully, and faced the view screen. The Koreth flagship was directly ahead, its weapons charging for the final blow. "To all who receive this," Taeho said, his voice calm and clear, "my name is Commander Taeho of the UNSF Horizon's Edge. Today we witnessed the slaughter of innocents by the Koreth Dominion. We could not stop it. We could only slow it down. 200 of my crew gave their lives to save 22,000 strangers. I do not regret our choice. I only regret that we could not save more." He paused. "To the people of Earth and all human colonies, the Koreth believe we are weak. They believe we will do nothing. They are wrong. Do not let our deaths be meaningless. Remember what happened here. Remember the screaming. Remember the children." He straightened his uniform. "And when you come for them, and you will come for them, show no mercy, because they showed none." Subin pressed the transmit button. "Message sent, Commander." Taeho smiled. "Thank you, Subin, for everything. Thank you, Commander, for being someone worth following." The Koreth weapons fired. The Horizon's Edge died in a ball of light and fire. Commander Taeho, Lieutenant Subin, Dr. Yuna, and 147 other humans ceased to exist in a single moment. But their message survived. It flew through space at the speed of light, carrying images of burning cities and dying children. It carried the screams of the Valen mother. It carried the final words of a commander who chose to fight instead of run. 12 hours later, the message reached Earth, and everything changed. Admiral Daewon was eating dinner with his family when his personal communicator began to scream. The sound was one he had never heard before, a tone reserved for only the most serious emergencies. His wife looked at him with worried eyes as he stood from the table. "I have to go," he said softly. "Is it bad?" she asked. He looked at his communicator. The words on the screen made his blood turn cold. "Yes," he replied. "I think it is very bad." 30 minutes later, Daewon stood in the United Nations Security Council chamber beneath the old city of Geneva. Around him sat the most powerful leaders in human civilization: presidents, prime ministers, generals, admirals. All of them stared at the massive screen on the wall, watching the transmission from the horizon's edge. The room was silent as they watched cities burn. They heard the screams of the dying. They saw the Koreth ships circle the planet like predators enjoying a hunt. And they listened to Commander Taeho's final words. When the transmission ended, chaos erupted. Politicians shouted at each other. Some demanded immediate war. Others called for diplomatic solutions. A few suggested that humanity should do nothing, that the Valen were not worth starting a galactic conflict over. Daewon listened to all of them. His face showed nothing, but inside, something old and cold was waking up. The Secretary General raised her hand for silence. "Admiral Daewon, you are the commander of all human military forces. What is your recommendation?" Daewon stood slowly. He was 63 years old. He had spent 40 years in the Space Force, training for a war that had never come. Humanity had been at peace for nearly a century. The military had become a formality, a symbol rather than a weapon. Ships were built and then stored. Soldiers trained and then retired without ever firing a shot in anger. But Daewon remembered the old lessons. He remembered what humanity was capable of when pushed. "The Koreth Dominion believes we are like the Velen," he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the room. "They believe we are soft. They believe we will send angry letters and hold meetings and do nothing while they slaughter the innocent." He looked around the room. 200 humans died today. They died protecting strangers. They died because they heard someone crying for help and could not walk away. That is who we are. That is what makes us human. He pointed at the screen, frozen on the image of the burning planet. If we do nothing, we tell the galaxy that human lives are cheap. We tell the Koreth that they can kill our people without consequence. We tell every predator civilization out there that humanity is prey. His voice hardened. "I will not allow that." The Secretary General leaned forward. "What are you proposing, Admiral?" "I am proposing war," Daewon said simply. "Total war. Not a limited response. Not a diplomatic mission with guns. I am proposing that we show the Koreth Dominion and everyone watching what happens when you make humanity angry." A politician stood up. "Admiral, this is madness. We have been at peace for almost 100 years. Our military is not prepared for a full-scale war." Daewon smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "You are wrong," he said. "We have been preparing for 100 years. We just hoped we would never need to use what we built." Within 72 hours, humanity's war machine came to life. In orbital shipyards above Earth, massive doors opened for the first time in decades. Ships that had been sleeping in darkness powered up their reactors and came alive. These were not diplomatic vessels. These were warships built for one purpose only: to destroy. On Mars, the ground shook as underground factories began producing weapons at a rate that had not been seen since the last Great War. Missiles, ammunition, armor. Everything that an army needed to kill was being made in quantities that seemed impossible. On colony worlds across human space, veterans answered the call. Men and women who had served their time and returned to civilian life put on their uniforms again. They said goodbye to their families, just as their grandparents had done, and boarded transport ships heading for the gathering fleet. Captain Ji-won stood on the deck of the carrier Eternal Vigil and watched the fleet assemble. She was 34 years old, a tactical officer who had never seen real combat. She had trained in simulations, studied battles in textbooks, and always wondered if she would be brave enough when the moment came. Now she would find out. "How many ships?" her executive officer asked, staring at the tactical display with wide eyes. Ji-won checked the numbers. She counted twice, certain she had made a mistake. 800 warships, she said. "And more coming." 800? The executive officer laughed in disbelief. "We are sending 800 ships?" "We are sending everything," Ji-won replied. "Admiral Daewon's orders. Every combat-capable vessel in the fleet is being mobilized. Every reserve ship is being reactivated. Every soldier who can hold a weapon is being called to service." She looked out at the growing armada. Dreadnoughts the size of small cities, carriers filled with fighter craft, destroyers and cruisers and frigates, all painted in the gray and black of the combat fleet. This was not a response. This was a statement. On Earth, Admiral Daewon gave a speech that was broadcast to every human colony. He stood before the cameras with the weight of 200 deaths on his shoulders and spoke directly to his people. "Today we go to war," he said. "Not because we want to, but because we must. The Koreth Dominion has killed our people. They have attacked our allies. They have proven that they will continue to kill until someone stops them." He paused. "We are going to stop them. To the men and women of the Space Force, I say this. What we do in the coming days will define humanity for generations. The galaxy is watching. They want to know what kind of species we are. Are we the kind that hides when danger comes? Or are we the kind that stands up, even when we are afraid, even when the cost is high, and fights for what is right? I know what kind we are. Go forward with courage. Go forward with honor. And show them all what happens when you hurt one of our own." The speech ended. Across human space, billions of people watched their fleet depart. Ji-won felt the Eternal Vigil's engines rumble to life. Around her, 800 warships turned toward the stars and began their journey. The Koreth Dominion had made a mistake. They had poked the sleeping giant, and now the giant was awake. The Koreth admiral named Vrektal sat in his command throne and felt satisfied. The harvest of Heras IV was complete. 160,000 Valen slaves were now in the cargo holds of his transport ships, ready to be sold or put to work in Dominion factories. The remaining 40,000 had been killed as an example to others. The strange human ships that had attacked his fleet were nothing but debris now. Vrektal had been confused by their foolish assault, but in the end, it did not matter. The humans were clearly as weak as the Valen. Perhaps the Dominion would harvest their worlds next. His second-in-command approached the throne. "Admiral, our long-range sensors have detected something strange." Vrektal waved his hand dismissively. "What is it?" "A large energy signature approaching from human space. Very large." "How large?" The second-in-command hesitated. "Our sensors are having difficulty counting individual ships. There may be an error." Vrektal frowned and looked at the tactical display. What he saw made him sit up straight. The display showed a mass of contacts so dense that it looked like a solid wall moving through space. The computer was struggling to separate individual signatures. Numbers flickered on the screen, changing every second as the sensors tried to make sense of what they were seeing. "That cannot be right," Vrektal said slowly. "Run the scan again." They ran the scan 3 times. The results were the same. 800 warships were approaching the Hyris system. Vrektal felt something he had not experienced in many years. Fear. "Signal the fleet," he commanded. "Battle formation, now!" But his fleet was only 40 ships. Some were damaged from the earlier battle. Many were transport vessels filled with slaves, not combat ships. Even at full strength, his force was nothing compared to what was coming. At exactly 1400 hours local time, the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace. The Koreth sensors screamed warnings as 800 vessels appeared in perfect formation. The ships were arranged in layers, like a wall of steel and fire. At the front were the destroyers and frigates, small and fast, designed to overwhelm enemy defenses. Behind them came the cruisers, bristling with weapons, and at the center, protected by everything else, were the dreadnoughts and carriers, ships so massive that they blocked out the stars behind them. At the head of the formation flew the flagship Eternal Vigil, commanded by Admiral Han Su. Han Su was 71 years old. He had white hair and a face carved with deep lines from decades of service. He had hoped to retire next year, to spend his remaining days on Earth with his grandchildren. Instead, he was leading the largest military operation in human history. He did not regret it. "Open a communication channel to the Koreth fleet," Han Su ordered. "All frequencies." The communication officer nodded. "Channel open, Admiral." Han Su stood from his command chair and faced the view screen. He spoke slowly and clearly, knowing that his words would be translated and broadcast to every Koreth ship. "This is Admiral Han Su of the United Nations Space Force. 72 hours ago, you attacked a defenseless colony. You murdered 200,000 innocent civilians. You killed a convoy of human ships that came in peace, carrying scientists and diplomats who meant you no harm." He paused to let the words sink in. "Among those ships was the Horizon's Edge. Aboard that vessel were 200 of my people. Good people, brave people, people who gave their lives so that strangers might live." His voice grew colder. "You killed them, and now we are here." On the Koreth flagship, Vrektal listened to the translation with growing dread. He had expected retaliation. He had prepared for perhaps 20 or 30 human ships, enough to make a token gesture of anger. Not this. Not 800 warships arranged like a hammer waiting to fall. "Surely we can negotiate," his second-in-command whispered. "Offer them compensation. Return the slaves. Something." Vrektal knew it was too late for that. The look in the human admiral's eyes was not the look of someone who wanted to talk. Han Su continued his message. "We do not negotiate with those who slaughter the innocent. We do not forgive. We do not forget. You have awakened something you do not understand." He straightened his uniform. "Prepare to face the consequences." The channel closed. On the Eternal Vigil, Captain Jiwan stood at her tactical station and watched her screens fill with data. 800 ships against 40. The math was simple. This was not going to be a battle. It was going to be an execution. "All ships report ready, Admiral," she said. Han Su nodded. "Then let us begin. All vessels, weapons free. Destroy the enemy fleet. Protect the transports carrying the survivors." The human fleet surged forward. What happened next would be studied in military academies for centuries. It was not really a battle. It was a demonstration of what happened when a galactic superpower unleashed its full might against an enemy that had mistaken patience for weakness. The Koreth fleet tried to fight. They really did. Their ships fired their weapons and launched their missiles and flew their formations. But for every shot they fired, the humans fired 100. For every ship they damaged, the humans destroyed 10 of theirs. In the first minute, the Koreth lost 12 ships. In the third minute, they lost 20 more. By the fifth minute, Vrektal's flagship was surrounded by debris that had once been his fleet. The battle lasted 9 minutes in total. When it was over, not a single Koreth warship remained intact. The transports filled with Valen slaves surrendered immediately, their crews throwing down their weapons and begging for mercy. Han Su granted them none. "The crews who participated in the massacre will be tried for war crimes," he announced. "The slaves will be freed, and we are not done." He turned to Jiwon. "Set course for the Korath home system. Signal all Allied vessels to join us. We are going to finish what they started." Jiwon nodded. Her hands moved across her console, sending orders to the fleet. The human armada turned toward Korath space. The war had just begun. Over the next 3 weeks, the human fleet carved a path through Korath territory. Every military base was destroyed. Every warship was hunted down and eliminated. The Dominion, which had believed itself invincible, discovered what it felt like to be prey. On their homeworld, the Korath leaders watched their empire crumble and did not understand how it had happened. They had attacked one small colony. They had killed one small convoy. How had this led to the complete destruction of everything they had built? They did not understand humans. They did not understand that for humans it was never about the numbers. It was not about strategy or resources or territory. It was about the principle. You do not hurt the innocent. You do not kill the helpless. And if you do, there will be consequences. The Korath learned this lesson too late. 1 year after the Battle of Hyrus IV, the Korath Dominion no longer existed. Their fleets were destroyed, their leaders had surrendered unconditionally, and now awaited trial in human courts. Their worlds had been stripped of all weapons and placed under international supervision. An empire that had terrorized a dozen species for 3 centuries had been erased from the galaxy in less than 12 months. The war was over, but its effects would last forever. On the liberated planet of Hyrus IV, construction crews worked day and night to rebuild what had been destroyed. Human engineers worked alongside Valen survivors, putting up new buildings where the old ones had burned: schools, hospitals, homes. The scars on the land would take generations to heal, but the healing had begun. In orbit above the planet, a new space station turned slowly against the stars. It was called Memorial Station, and it had been built for one purpose: to remember. Rear Admiral Ji Won stood before the main observation window and watched the planet turn below. She had been promoted twice since the war began. Her tactical skills during the campaign had earned her respect throughout the fleet. But today, she was not here as an officer. She was here as a human being, paying respect to those who had made everything possible. The ceremony was about to begin. Behind her, thousands of people filled the station's great hall. Human soldiers in dress uniforms stood alongside Valen civilians in traditional robes. Diplomats from a dozen species watched from observation galleries. News cameras broadcast the event to billions of viewers across the galaxy. At the center of the hall stood a statue made of white stone. It showed 5 figures standing together, their faces turned toward the stars. Commander Taeho stood at the front, his hand raised as if giving an order. Behind him were Lieutenant Subin, Dr. Yuna, and 2 other crew members representing everyone who had died on the convoy. The sculptor had worked from photographs and descriptions provided by family members. The faces were remarkably accurate. Looking at them, Ji-won felt like she could almost hear their voices. The Secretary General of the United Nations stepped forward to speak. She was an older woman with gray hair and kind eyes that had seen too much sorrow in the past year. 1 year ago today, she began, 200 humans gave their lives to save strangers they had never met. They were not soldiers. They were diplomats, scientists, engineers, and explorers. They came in peace, carrying gifts and goodwill. And when they heard the cries of the innocent, they did not hesitate. They did not calculate the odds. They did not wait for orders. She paused. They simply acted. Commander Taeho and his crew knew they could not win. They knew they would die. But they also knew that every minute they bought was another life saved. In the end, They saved 22,000 Velan civilians, 22,000 people who are alive today because 5 small ships refused to look away from suffering. The Secretary General gestured toward the statue. This monument stands as a reminder of who we are at our best, a reminder of what we will do when someone cries for help, and a reminder to the galaxy of what happens when you threaten those we have sworn to protect. After the speech, the crowd began to move through the hall, laying flowers and small tokens at the base of the statue. Ji-won waited until the crowd thinned before approaching. She was not alone. A small Velan child walked beside her, holding her hand. The child's name was Mira, and she was one of the 22,000 who had escaped Hyras 4 on that terrible day 1 year ago. Her parents had not survived. She now lived with a human foster family on Earth. They stopped before the statue. Ji-won looked up at the stone faces of the heroes and felt her eyes grow wet. Mira tugged on her hand. "Admiral Ji-won?" "Yes, Mira? Why did they save us?" The child's voice was soft and confused. "They did not know us. We were strangers to them." "Why did they die for strangers?" Ji-won knelt down so that she was at eye level with the child. It was a question she had thought about many times. It was a question that alien diplomats had asked in 100 different ways over the past year, unable to understand why humans would sacrifice themselves for species they had never met. "Because that is who we are," Ji-won said gently. "When we hear someone crying for help, we answer. When we see someone hurting the weak, we stop them. It does not matter if they are human or Velan or anyone else. What matters is that they need help, and we can give it." She looked up at the statue of Commander Tae-ho. "And when someone makes us angry enough to fight, when someone crosses the line and hurts the innocent, we do not stop until it is finished." Mira was quiet for a moment. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small white flower. She placed it carefully at the base of the statue, next to hundreds of other offerings. "Thank you," she whispered to the stone figures. "Thank you for saving me." Ji-won stood and placed her hand on the child's shoulder. Together, they looked up at the heroes who had given everything. In the year since the war, the galaxy had changed. Species that had never spoken to humans before now sent ambassadors. Trade agreements multiplied. Alliances formed. Humanity's reputation had transformed from curious newcomers to something else entirely. Some called them protectors. Others called them avengers. A few called them monsters. But everyone agreed on one thing. You did not threaten humanity or its friends. The lesson was whispered in alien councils for generations. Parents told their children. Teachers taught their students. Military commanders studied the war in detail, trying to understand how a species so peaceful had become so terrifying so quickly. The answer was always the same. Humanity did not seek war. They built their society on cooperation and diplomacy. They preferred to talk rather than fight. They were genuinely kind, genuinely generous, genuinely hopeful that the galaxy could be a place of peace. But when war found them, when the innocent cried out, when the line was crossed, they did not send a message. They became one. On Memorial Station, Rear Admiral Ji-won took one last look at the statue before turning to leave. The ceremony was over. The speeches had been made. The flowers had been laid. But the memory would never fade. As she walked through the halls of the station, she passed a window that looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, human ships patrolled the borders of protected space. Somewhere out there, species who had once been prey now slept safely, knowing that if they screamed, someone would answer. Somewhere out there, Commander Tae-ho and his crew lived on in the hearts of everyone they had saved. Ji-won paused at the window. "Rest well, Commander," she said softly. "We will take it from here." Then she continued on her way, ready to face whatever challenges the future would bring. because that was what humans did. They faced the darkness, and they never looked away.